A soldier returns home, only to find his beloved daughter lying on the floor in a state of heartbreaking exhaustion. Years of battle hadn't prepared the military man for this. Who let this happen, and what untold challenges has she faced while he was away? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Ryan Matthews gripped the steering wheel. His knuckles, white as his car, wound through the familiar countryside roads. The setting sun painted the fields in warm golden hues, stretching shadows across the landscape like reaching fingers. He remembered how this view used to bring him peace after long days of training, but now it just made his heart ache. His eyes caught the old Miller farm on his right, its red barn weathered but still standing proud. Everything looked smaller somehow, changed yet exactly the same. 5 years of deployment had a way of shifting perspectives. Lily's face floated in his mind. Her last visit before he shipped out. She had been trying so hard to be brave, her small hands clutching his uniform sleeve. "Promise you'll come back, Dad?" she had whispered, those bright eyes of hers shining with hope despite everything that had happened. "Always, sweetheart," he had promised. And he had kept that promise, hadn't he? But at what cost? The memory of discovering Sarah's betrayal hit him like a physical blow. He could still see the text messages on her phone, could still feel the sick feeling in his stomach as their marriage crumbled in his hands. Sarah hadn't even tried to deny it. She had moved in with Mark within weeks, taking Lily with her. Ryan's jaw clenched as he passed the old ice cream shop where they used to take Lily on Sundays. Now Sarah lived across town with her new husband and their son, and Lily, his Lily, was there too, caught in the middle of it all. The custody arrangement had been the final twist of the knife. Limited visits, supervised time, as if he were some kind of threat. Being deployed had made it even worse, reducing his connection to video calls and letters that felt hollow compared to real hugs and shared moments. The familiar landmarks kept coming. The high school where he had first met Sarah, the park where Lily had learned to ride her bike, the church where they had once been a family. Each site carried the weight of what was lost. His hands tightened on the wheel as he thought about the restrictions he still faced. The battles he had fought overseas somehow seemed simpler than the one waiting for him here. At least there, he had known who his enemies were. The town's welcome sign appeared around the bend, its cheerful letters a stark contrast to the turmoil in his chest. "Welcome to Cedar Grove, where family comes first." Ryan's jaw clenched as he passed it, his heart pounding with equal parts determination and dread. He was home, but the word didn't mean what it used to. The front door creaked open as Ryan stepped into his modest house, the sound echoing through the empty rooms. Stale air and silence greeted him, a stark contrast to the home he remembered. Dust motes danced lazily in the afternoon sunlight that filtered through the living room window, creating ghostly patterns on the hardwood floor. He dropped his military duffel bags by the door with a heavy thud. His eyes swept across the space, taking in the familiar yet somehow foreign surroundings. The old leather couch still sat against the wall, but the cheerful throw pillows Lily had picked out were gone. The shelf that once displayed her art projects stood bare except for a thin layer of dust. Moving through the living room, Ryan's boots left imprints in the dust that had settled on the floor. Each step stirred up memories he'd tried to keep at bay during his deployment. Here was where Lily had built her blanket forts. There by the window was her favorite reading spot where she'd curl up with a book on rainy afternoons. The kitchen held even more ghosts. Lily's drawing still hung on the refrigerator, held by alphabet magnets she'd arranged into silly messages. The colors had faded slightly, but her childish artwork still brought a lump to his throat. A family photo caught his eye. The three of them at the county fair, all smiles and cotton candy-stained fingers. It was taken just months before he discovered Sarah's betrayal. Ryan inhaled deeply, trying to center himself. The air smelled of abandonment and lost time, but underneath lay traces of home, the lingering scent of pine from the wooden cabinets, the slight mustiness of the old wallpaper Lily had helped pick out. His hand trembled slightly as he pulled his phone from his pocket. Sarah's number was still in his contacts, though he'd barely used it during his deployment. Their communications had been strictly about Lily, conducted mainly through emails and his lawyer. The phone felt heavy in his hand as he pressed the call button. Each ring seemed to stretch for an eternity, echoing in the silent house. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. The sound of his own heartbeat grew louder with each unanswered ring until finally, the call went to voicemail. Ryan lowered the phone slowly, frustration building in his chest like a gathering storm. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence, each second marking time until he could see Lily again. He sank into one of the kitchen chairs, the wood creaking under his weight, and placed the phone on the table in front of him. The steady tick-tock of the clock filled the room, mixing with the sound of his measured breathing as he sat alone in the quiet house. The living room grew darker as Ryan paced back and forth, his footsteps creating a steady rhythm on the hardwood floor. Outside, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving only a faint purple glow that barely penetrated the windows. He checked his phone for the 10th time in the past hour. No missed calls, no messages, nothing but the blank screen staring back at him. The house felt colder now, the emptiness more pronounced in the gathering darkness. Ryan pulled his jacket tighter around himself, his military training kicking in as he analyzed the situation. Something wasn't right. Sarah had never completely blocked his attempts to contact Lily, even during the worst of their divorce. He tried Sarah's number again, his jaw clenching as the call went straight to voicemail. Her cheerful recorded message felt like a mockery now. "This is Sarah. Leave a message." Ryan ended the call without speaking, his worry transforming into a knot in his stomach. The soldier in him took over, breaking down the problem into manageable pieces. He knew Sarah's address. She still lived in the same house where she'd moved with her new husband. It was a 20-minute drive across town. He could go there first thing in the morning, early enough to catch them before they left for work and school. Ryan's mind raced through possible scenarios as he continued his relentless pacing. Maybe Sarah's phone was broken. Maybe she was busy. But his instincts told him otherwise. During his deployment, he'd learned to trust these gut feelings. They'd kept him alive more than once. The thought of Lily alone in that house with Sarah and her new husband made his chest tighten. What had his daughter faced while he was away? The few video calls they'd managed had shown him a quieter version of his usually bubbly girl. At the time, he'd attributed it to normal teenage changes, but now... Ryan pulled up his phone's alarm settings, setting it for 6 a.m., early enough to catch them at home, late enough to not appear threatening. He grabbed the throw blanket from the back of the couch, the one Lily had picked out years ago covered in cartoon pandas, and stretched out on the sofa. The familiar leather creaked beneath him as he settled in, unable to face the master bedroom and its memories tonight. His mind stayed sharp despite his physical exhaustion, counting down the hours until morning. The ticking clock on the wall marked each second, each minute that kept him from his daughter. In the darkness, Ryan lay still but alert, his military training evident even in his rest position, ready to move at a moment's notice. His phone remained clutched in his hand, screen dark, but volume turned up high, just in case Sarah called back. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting long shadows across Ryan's face as his eyes snapped open at the first note of his alarm. His hand moved automatically to silence it, military precision evident in his movements despite the restless night on the couch. The unease that had settled in his chest overnight grew heavier as he stood, muscles tense with anticipation. He grabbed his keys and jacket, moving with purpose through the quiet house. The drive to Sarah's felt longer than the 20 minutes it actually took, each traffic light and turn stretching out in the early morning stillness. The streets were empty, most of the town still asleep, giving the whole scene an otherworldly feel that only heightened Ryan's anxiety. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as he turned onto Sarah's street. The houses looked peaceful, with their perfectly manicured lawns catching the first rays of sunlight. Sarah's house, a 2-story colonial with white trim, stood silent among them. No lights shone through the windows. No movement disturbed the morning calm. Ryan parked across the street, his eyes scanning the property for any signs of life. The family car sat in the driveway, covered in a light layer of morning dew. Something about its abandoned appearance made his stomach twist. He approached the front door, each step measured and deliberate. The porch boards creaked beneath his feet as he raised his hand to knock. The sound echoed hollowly, Unanswered. He tried again, louder this time. "Sarah?" His voice carried across the quiet neighborhood. "Lily?" Nothing but silence answered him. The dread that had been building in his chest crystallized into something sharp and urgent. His eyes fell to the corner of the porch, where a loose board concealed the emergency key he'd helped install years ago. The memory of Sarah insisting on its placement, just in case, flashed through his mind. Ryan knelt down, his fingers finding the familiar spot. The key was still there, cool against his palm. He stood for a moment, weighing it in his hand, the soldier in him calculating risks against necessity. The father in him won out. The lock turned smoothly, and the door opened with a soft creak. The living room looked normal at first glance. Family photos on the walls, magazines scattered on the coffee table. But there was something off about it, an emptiness that went beyond mere silence. The air felt stale and cold. He moved through the house, his footsteps careful and quiet. "Lily?" He called out again, softer now. A sound from upstairs drew his attention, faint but unmistakable in the quiet house. Following the sound led him to Lily's room. The sight that greeted him stopped him cold. There, curled up on the floor beside her bed, lay his daughter. She looked so small, so fragile, her body shivering despite the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Ryan dropped to his knees beside her, his heart pounding. "Lily," he whispered, his voice trembling as he reached out toward her. His hand hovered just above her shoulder, afraid of what he might find when he touched her. Ryan's voice quivered as he whispered Lily's name again, the morning light streaming through her bedroom window, casting weak shadows across her frail figure on the floor. His hand trembled as he reached out, gently placing it on her thin shoulder. The contact sent a wave of emotions crashing through him, shock at her condition, burning anger at those who let this happen, and crushing guilt for not being there to prevent it. Her skin felt cool beneath his palm, and he could feel each bone beneath her thin sweater. The sight of her so vulnerable, so diminished, made his throat tighten with unshed tears. This was his little girl, the one who used to run to him with scraped knees and proud artwork, now lying curled up on the cold floor. At his touch, Lily stirred slightly. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then slowly clearing as she looked up at him. Fear flickered across her tired face for a brief moment, before recognition dawned. Her chapped lips parted and relief washed over her features as she realized who was beside her. Tears welled up in her eyes, making them shine in the dim light. Her hand, so small and fragile, reached out weakly toward him. The simple gesture broke something inside Ryan, seeing how much effort it took for her to make such a basic movement. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "You're here!" The words came out barely louder than a breath, but they echoed in Ryan's heart like thunder. Without hesitation, he slipped one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her shoulders, lifting her as carefully as if she were made of glass. She felt lighter than he remembered, too light, and the realization only fueled the protective fire burning in his chest. Lily's head naturally found its place against his shoulder, fitting there just as it had when she was small. The room's emptiness pressed in around them, the cold air a stark contrast to the warmth of holding his daughter close. Ryan looked down at Lily's face, seeing both the little girl he remembered and the suffering she'd endured in his absence. Her fingers weakly gripped his shirt, as if afraid he might disappear. "You're safe now," he whispered, holding her securely as he turned toward the door. Each step was measured and steady as he carried her from the room that had become her prison, his military training helping him maintain his composure despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. Ryan carefully lifted Lily from the passenger seat, her fragile form barely weighing anything in his strong arms. With gentle movements, he arranged her in the back seat of his car, making sure she was lying comfortably. He grabbed an old blanket from his trunk and tucked it around her, protecting her from the morning chill. Standing up, he cast one last look at the silent house. Its windows stared back at him like empty eyes, hiding the painful memories of what had happened within its walls. His jaw clenched as he slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. Every few seconds, his eyes darted to the rearview mirror, checking on Lily. She lay still, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The familiar streets passed by as he drove carefully, avoiding any bumps or sudden movements that might disturb her rest. As they pulled into his driveway, he noticed Lily's eyes beginning to open wider. She blinked slowly, taking in the surroundings through the car window. Her gaze moved around as if trying to confirm that this wasn't just a dream. When he opened the back door, she tried to sit up on her own. Her arms trembled with the effort, and Ryan's heart squeezed at the sight. He quickly moved to help her, supporting her back as she found her balance. "Easy there, sweetheart," he murmured, helping her out of the car. Inside the house, Ryan settled her on the living room couch, wrapping her in a thick, soft blanket. As soon as he finished tucking it around her, Lily reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. The hug was weak but filled with emotion. "I missed you so much," she whispered against his shoulder. Ryan held her carefully, afraid of hurting her but unwilling to let go. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly. "Do you need anything?" Lily shook her head slightly against his chest. "I'm just tired, Dad," she said, her voice barely audible. Her fingers gripped his shirt weakly, as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. As he held her, Ryan's mind raced through everything he'd need to help her recover. Food, definitely. Nutritious meals to help her regain strength. A doctor's visit as soon as possible. New clothes. But most importantly, time and patience to heal the emotional wounds that weren't visible. Lily slowly leaned back against the couch cushions, her eyes drifting closed. For the first time since he'd found her, her face showed a hint of peace. Ryan sat beside her, watching over her rest, his mind working through all the steps he'd need to take to keep her safe and help her heal. The setting sun painted the living room in warm orange hues as Ryan sat beside Lily on the couch. Her small frame was curled up under the blanket, and he gently stroked her hair, offering what comfort he could through the simple gesture. When her eyes fluttered open and met his, there was a moment of understanding between them. A father's love, meeting a daughter's trust. "Tell me what's been happening," Ryan said softly, working to keep his voice steady despite the worry churning inside him. Lily's eyes darted away, her fingers clutching the edge of the blanket. She took a shaky breath, as if gathering her courage. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled but carried a determination to be heard. They hate me being there," she began. "Mark, my stepfather. He always looks at me like I'm in the way, like I'm not supposed to exist." Her voice cracked slightly. "And Tommy, his son, he follows me around telling me I don't belong there, that I'm nothing but trouble." Ryan's hand continued its gentle movement through her hair, though inside his anger blazed. He kept his expression calm and supportive, not wanting to frighten her with the fury he felt toward those who had hurt her. "They wouldn't let me eat with them sometimes," Lily continued, tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. "Said I hadn't earned it. Mom." She just agreed with whatever they said. When things went missing or got broken, they'd blame me, even when I wasn't home. Her shoulders shook as she tried to hold back sobs. They'd lock the pantry when they went out, turn off the heat to my room in winter. Mom said I was being dramatic when I complained about being cold. Ryan's jaw clenched, but he maintained his gentle demeanor, knowing Lily needed his strength now more than his anger. "I was so scared, Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought no one would come." The words hit Ryan like physical blows. He pulled Lily into his arms, holding her protectively against his chest. His eyes hardened with determination as he made his promise. "You're not staying there another day." Lily nodded against his chest, and for the first time since he'd found her, a tiny spark of hope appeared in her tired eyes. Night settled over the house, bringing with it deep shadows that crept along the walls. In the kitchen, Ryan moved with purpose, preparing a simple meal of soup and bread. The steady ticking of the wall clock punctuated the quiet, marking time as he stirred the pot on the stove. His mind raced with thoughts of what needed to be done, but for now, feeding Lily was his priority. Through the kitchen doorway, he could see her small form on the couch, wrapped in the blanket he'd given her. The sight made his heart ache, but he focused on the task at hand, carefully ladling the hot soup into a bowl. Ryan carried the warm soup to Lily, who managed to lift her head and offer a weak but grateful smile. As she took her first few spoonfuls, he settled beside her, watching her eat with relief. But there were still questions that needed answers. "What else did they do?" he asked softly, keeping his voice gentle and steady. Lily's hand trembled as she set down her spoon, her eyes fixed on the bowl in her lap as she began to speak. They kept me away from everyone," she said quietly. "I wasn't allowed to have friends over. They'd lock me in my room when guests came." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "When I did something wrong, or when they said I did something wrong, they'd make me sleep under the attic. It was cold up there and dark." Ryan's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his face neutral, not wanting to frighten her with his anger. "They wouldn't feed me sometimes," Lily continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tommy would eat in front of me, laughing. He'd tell me I didn't deserve food." She glanced up briefly. "They're on a trip now. They should have been back already." "And your mom?" Ryan prompted gently, though he dreaded the answer. Lily's lower lip trembled. "Mom didn't do anything to stop them. She'd just look away or leave the room. Sometimes she'd say I was being difficult, that I needed to try harder to fit in." Each word felt like a physical blow to Ryan's chest, but he maintained his composure. He reached out and took Lily's small hand in his, meeting her tear-filled eyes. "I'm going to fix this, Lily, I promise." She looked up at him, tears glistening in her eyes but with a hint of hope breaking through. She nodded, and for the first time since he'd found her, she seemed to truly believe that things might get better. Next morning, Ryan shifted in the armchair where he'd kept his vigil through the night, his muscles stiff but his mind alert. He watched Lily's peaceful form on the couch, her chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of deep sleep. It was the first real rest she'd had in months, and he was grateful for every moment of it. Careful not to make any sudden noise, Ryan eased himself up from the chair and made his way to the kitchen. His movements were purposeful as he pulled out eggs, bread, and fruit from the fridge. The familiar routine of cooking helped clear his mind as he planned their next steps. The smell of toast and scrambled eggs filled the house. Ryan arranged everything on a tray, adding a glass of orange juice and some fresh strawberries, a touch of normalcy he knew Lily needed. With breakfast ready, he returned to the living room and knelt beside the couch. "Lily," he said softly, touching her shoulder with gentle fingers. "Time to wake up, sweetheart." Her eyes fluttered open, clearer and more focused than they'd been the day before. For a moment, she looked confused, then relief washed over her face as she remembered where she was. "Good morning, sweetheart," Ryan said warmly, helping her sit up. He placed the tray across her lap, and they shared the breakfast in comfortable silence. The morning light wrapped around them like a protective cocoon, making the horrors of yesterday feel distant. After a few bites, Ryan set down his fork. "Lily," he began carefully, "I want you to know something important." He waited until she met his eyes. "You won't have to go back to that house. Not ever again." Lily's fork paused halfway to her mouth, her eyes widening. Hope and fear danced across her face as she processed his words. "Really?" she whispered, her voice small but eager. "Really?" Ryan confirmed, his voice steady and sure. "I'm going to protect you. No one will hurt you again." The tension in Lily's shoulders began to melt away. She set down her fork and looked at her father with growing confidence. "Promise?" "I promise," Ryan said firmly, reaching out to squeeze her hand. After they finished breakfast, Ryan stood and held out his hand to Lily. She took it without hesitation, and together they walked to the front door. The morning air was crisp and clean as they stepped outside, carrying with it the promise of something new and better. Ryan and Lily stepped back into the house, their cheeks pink from the morning air. He noticed a small, tentative smile playing on her lips, a sight that made his heart leap. It had been so long since he'd seen even a hint of happiness on her face. "How about some lunch?" Ryan asked, heading toward the kitchen. "I make a mean chicken noodle soup." Lily nodded, settling into one of the wooden chairs at the dining table. Ryan moved efficiently around the kitchen, pulling out ingredients and heating up the broth. He kept glancing at his daughter, noting how she seemed more relaxed with each passing hour. The soup simmered on the stove, filling the house with warm, comforting aromas. Ryan ladled a generous portion into a bowl and placed it in front of Lily, along with some crusty bread. "Careful, it's hot," he cautioned softly. Lily wrapped her hands around the warm bowl, breathing in the steam before taking a small spoonful. She ate slowly, deliberately, as if savoring each bite. Some color had returned to her cheeks, and the haunted look in her eyes had begun to fade. "Remember when we used to have picnics in the backyard?" Lily asked suddenly, her voice quiet but steady. Ryan sat down across from her. "Of course, you always insisted on bringing your stuffed elephant." "Mr. Trunks," Lily said, a ghost of a smile appearing. "I loved those picnics." As she continued eating, Ryan's mind worked through his options. He needed to make sure Sarah and her husband Tommy couldn't get anywhere near Lily again. The legal battle ahead would be challenging, but he was prepared to fight with everything he had. When Lily finished her soup, Ryan could see exhaustion creeping back into her features. "How about we get you settled in for a nap?" He led her to her old bedroom, which he'd quickly prepared earlier. The familiar space seemed to comfort her immediately. Ryan pulled back the soft purple comforter and helped her get comfortable. "Here's your nightlight," he said, plugging in the small star-shaped lamp that had always helped her feel safe. He tucked the blanket around her shoulders, making sure she was warm and cozy. "Thanks, Dad," Lily whispered, her eyes already growing heavy. Ryan watched her drift off to sleep before quietly making his way back to the living room. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sank into his armchair, listening to the peaceful sound of Lily's steady breathing from down the hall. The house felt different now, warmer, more complete. His daughter was safe, and that was all that mattered. The evening's quiet was shattered by the harsh buzz of Ryan's phone against the wooden coffee table, the vibration making his coffee mug tremble slightly. His heart skipped a beat as he saw the name illuminated on the screen. Sarah. For a moment, he just stared at it, his hand hovering over the device as it continued to vibrate insistently, each buzz feeling like a small electric shock through his body. Finally, he picked it up, his jaw clenching as he prepared himself for the conversation he knew was coming. "Hello?" His voice was steady, controlled, masking the storm of emotions beneath. "Ryan, did you take Lily?" Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker, a mix of panic and accusation that made his stomach turn. He took a deep breath, his free hand gripping the armrest of his chair until his knuckles turned white. "Yes, I did." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Ryan could hear Sarah's breathing on the other end, quick and agitated, like a cornered animal. "You have no right to just take her." Sarah's voice came back sharp and defensive, the panic giving way to anger that crackled through the phone line. "And you had no right to let her suffer." Ryan's response was ice cold, each word weighted with controlled fury that had been building for months. "I found her on the floor, Sarah, alone, hungry, scared out of her mind." "She's always been dramatic, Ryan. You know how she exaggerates?" "Stop," Ryan cut her off, his voice dropping dangerously low, trembling with barely contained rage. "I saw the bruises. I saw how thin she is. Don't you dare try to explain this away. Not this time." "You don't understand what it's been like." Sarah's voice took on a pleading tone, thick with desperation. "Tommy, he's just strict with discipline and sometimes—" "Strict?" Ryan's laugh was hollow, echoing in the quiet room. "Is that what you call leaving our daughter to sleep in the attic? Denying her food? Making her terrified to even make a sound? That's not— she's lying to you." "I'm not listening to this anymore," Ryan said, his voice firm and final, leaving no room for argument. "I'll make sure she's safe from now on. That's a promise." "Ryan, wait." He ended the call, his heart pounding against his ribs like a drum. Taking a few deep breaths to steady himself, he glanced down the darkened hallway toward Lily's room, where she was still sleeping peacefully in her new bed. Later that evening, Ryan's phone rang again. Sarah's name flashed across the screen, and this time he answered without hesitation. his fingers steady as they pressed the accept button. "Ryan, listen to me," Sarah started, her voice carrying a desperate edge that he'd heard before, back when she'd tried to explain away her affair. "You don't understand what's really been going on." "Then explain it to me, Sarah." His voice was cold, controlled, like steel wrapped in velvet. "Lily's been difficult. She's always making up stories, trying to get attention. You know how she is." Sarah's words tumbled out faster now. She refuses to follow simple rules. She talks back to Tommy. She upsets her stepbrother. Ryan's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. "Don't, Sarah, just don't. This is on you and your husband. You should have protected her." "Protected her?" Sarah's laugh was sharp, brittle. "From what? From having to do chores? From learning discipline? She needs structure, Ryan. She needs food," Ryan cut in, his voice dropping dangerously low. "She needs warmth. She needs a mother who actually cares about her well-being instead of choosing her new husband over her own daughter." "That's not fair. You have no idea what it's like trying to blend two families together. If Lily would just try..." "Try?" Ryan's voice cracked like a whip. "Our daughter was sleeping on the floor, Sarah. She's been starved, locked away, treated like she's nothing. And you let it happen." "You weren't here." Sarah's voice rose, taking on a hysterical edge. "You don't know..." "No, I wasn't here. That's my burden to bear. But I'm here now and things are going to change." Ryan's words were measured, precise. "My lawyer will be in touch. Count on it." "You can't do this," Sarah's voice faltered, the reality of the situation finally seeming to sink in. "Ryan, please." "I can and I will. For once in her life, someone's going to stand up for Lily." The line went quiet for a moment before Sarah spoke again, her voice small. "It wasn't supposed to be like this?" "No, it wasn't," Ryan agreed, his tone final. "But you made your choices, Sarah. Now you'll have to live with them." He ended the call and set the phone down on the coffee table, exhaling slowly as the weight of the confrontation settled over him. It was at this moment when Ryan made a decision that would change the life of his daughter. He was going to fight for custody, while making sure Tommy pays for what he did to his daughter. He went up to his desk and decided to contact a lawyer to evaluate his options. His fingers hovered over his phone before dialing a number he hadn't used in years. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. "James Reynolds. How can I help you?" "James, it's Ryan Matthews." He straightened in his chair, gathering his thoughts. "I need your help with a custody case. It's about my daughter, Lily." The lawyer's tone shifted from professional to concerned. "Ryan, it's been a while. Tell me what's happening." Ryan's voice remained controlled as he detailed the situation, each word carefully chosen. "My ex-wife Sarah and her new husband have been abusing my daughter. I found her yesterday, alone in their house, malnourished and sleeping on the floor." His grip tightened on the phone. "They've been starving her, isolating her, treating her like she's nothing." James listened intently, occasionally asking questions about specific incidents and timeframes. "When did this start? Has Lily mentioned any witnesses? Are there any visible signs of the abuse?" "She's lost weight significantly," Ryan replied, glancing at Lily, who sat at the dining table, focused on her drawing. "And there might be evidence of her being locked in the attic." "We need solid, undeniable proof of the mistreatment," James said, his tone serious. "Photos, medical records, witness statements, anything that can corroborate Lily's account. Without concrete evidence, it's her word against theirs." Ryan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "What's our first step?" "First, we document everything. Lily's current physical condition, any marks or signs of neglect. Then we need a medical examination," James explained. "I'll file for an emergency custody order based on what we have, but building a strong case will take more." "Whatever it takes," Ryan said firmly. "I'm not letting her go back there." "One more thing, Ryan," James added. "Keep detailed records of every interaction with Sarah from now on. Every call, every text. It could all be important later." Ryan's eyes stayed fixed on Lily as he absorbed the lawyer's words. She looked peaceful, absorbed in her artwork, seemingly unaware of the conversation that would shape her future. He set the phone down and leaned back in his chair, the weight of what lay ahead settling over him. Looking at his daughter, he whispered, "This ends now." Next day, Ryan navigated the aisles of the electronics store with purposeful strides, his eyes scanning the shelves for exactly what he needed. The small recording devices had to be perfect, discreet enough to go unnoticed but powerful enough to capture clear audio. He selected 3 high-quality units, each no bigger than a matchbox. "These should work well for home security," he told the clerk casually, maintaining a neutral expression as he paid in cash. Back in his car, he carefully unpacked each device, testing their battery life and recording quality. His military training kicked in as he methodically checked every feature, leaving nothing to chance. Each device had a voice activation function that would help preserve battery life, perfect for capturing any incidents without wasting storage space. At home, he found Lily curled up on the couch with her sketchbook. Her pencil moved across the paper in gentle strokes, creating what looked like a butterfly. Ryan sat beside her, keeping his voice light and steady. "Hey, sweetheart, we need to make a quick trip to get your things from your mom's house," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "Just some clothes and anything important to you. We'll just go in, pack what you need, and come right back home. I'll be with you the whole time," Ryan said. She nodded slowly, trust evident in her eyes despite the lingering anxiety. Ryan helped her make a simple list of essential items to pack, keeping the conversation casual and calm, despite the weight of what he was planning. In his bedroom, Ryan laid out the recording devices on his bed, double-checking each one last time. He'd chosen strategic locations. Under Lily's bed would capture any nighttime incident, behind the living room picture frame would record the common areas, and the one in the hallway would catch anyone entering or leaving. The devices were small enough to blend into the shadows, their dark cases making them nearly invisible. He packed them carefully in his backpack, along with some tools he might need to secure them in place. Each movement was deliberate, measured, like preparing gear for a mission. In many ways, this was exactly that, a mission to protect his daughter. Lily appeared in his doorway holding her empty backpack. "I'm ready, Dad." Ryan looked up at her, his heart swelling with both love and determination. The sight of her standing there, trying to be brave despite everything she'd been through, strengthened his resolve. "We'll be in and out, I promise," he said, zipping up his backpack with finality. The birds were beginning to chirp in Sarah's front yard as Ryan pulled into the driveway. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel before he forced himself to relax, glancing at Lily in the passenger seat. She sat perfectly still, her backpack clutched tightly to her chest. "Remember what I said. We'll be quick," Ryan assured her, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his gut. They approached the front door together and Ryan pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed inside, followed by footsteps. Sarah opened the door, her face immediately hardening when she saw them. "What are you doing here, Ryan?" she asked, her eyes darting between him and Lily. Ryan kept his expression neutral, his voice casual. "Just here to get some of Lily's things. Clothes, books, the essentials." Sarah hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line before she stepped aside. "Make it quick." As they entered, Ryan's trained eyes took in every detail. A lamp lay broken in the corner, poorly hidden behind a plant. An overturned chair had been hastily righted, its back slightly crooked. The house felt cold, despite the morning sun streaming through the windows. Lily hovered near the entrance, her shoulders hunched. Ryan placed a gentle hand on her back, guiding her forward. "Let's start in your room, sweetheart." As they moved through the house, Ryan carefully executed his plan. While helping Lily gather her belongings, he strategically placed the first device under her bed, his movements swift and precise. Sarah watched from the doorway, arms crossed. "She's been making up stories again, hasn't she?" Sarah's voice dripped with dismissal. Ryan ignored the comment, focusing instead on slipping the second device behind a family photo in the hallway while pretending to study it. "Remember when we took this, Lily?" he asked, drawing attention away from his true purpose. The third device found its home near the living room entrance as Ryan helped Lily pack her books. Each placement was calculated, hidden in plain sight while Sarah's suspicious gaze followed them around the house. Lily moved quickly, gathering her belongings with trembling hands. Her eyes kept darting to her father, seeking reassurance. Ryan stayed close, maintaining a stream of casual conversation while his heart pounded against his ribs. "I think that's everything we need for now," Ryan announced, noting how Lily's shoulders relaxed at his words. He turned to Sarah with a tight smile. "Thanks for understanding." Sarah's expression remained guarded as she watched them gather the packed bags. "You can't keep her away forever, Ryan." Without even looking back, Ryan and Lily walked out of the house, heading straight to his home, devoid of any emotion for cruel Sarah. Back at his house, Ryan meticulously set up the monitoring equipment on the kitchen table. His laptop hummed quietly as he connected the receivers that would pick up signals from the hidden devices. Then he adjusted the settings, making sure everything was properly calibrated. His eyes kept darting to the screen, watching for any indication of incoming data. Each notification sound made his shoulders tense, though most were just system updates. Lily was reading peacefully in her room, unaware of the surveillance operation taking place. As evening settled in, Ryan paced between the kitchen and living room, his military training evident in his controlled movements, despite his growing anxiety. The first real ping came just after sunset. His hands trembled slightly as he sat down and clicked play on the audio file. Sarah's husband's voice filled the quiet kitchen, harsh and cutting. "Good riddance to that brat," he snarled. "Should have done more to teach her a lesson while she was here." The sound of his stepson's mocking laughter followed. "Yeah, Dad. Maybe we were too soft on her. Beating her more might have fixed her attitude. I wonder why didn't we keep her locked in the attic forever instead of leaving her there for just a week?" Ryan's jaw clenched so tight it hurt, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. More cruel comments poured through the speakers, each word confirming his worst fears about what Lily had endured. "Let her stay away," Sarah's husband continued. "One less mouth to feed, one less problem to deal with. I know she's my daughter, but you guys are my family now, and family always comes first." As Ryan listened, he methodically documented everything, marking timestamps and noting specific threats and admissions. His military precision helped him maintain focus despite the rage building in his chest. Each new revelation was carefully cataloged as potential evidence, his years of training helping him stay objective even as his parental instincts screamed for immediate action. The recordings painted a clear picture of the hostile environment Lily had survived, the casual cruelty, the constant belittlement, the threats that had become normal in that household. Ryan's notes grew longer as more files arrived, each one adding weight to their case. Through the small hallway, he could see Lily's door slightly ajar, hear her soft breathing as she played peacefully. The contrast between her current safety and the horrible treatment documented in the recordings made his heart ache. Ryan shut his laptop, the evidence secured and backed up. His expression hardened with determination as he looked toward Lily's room. "It's time to take the next step," he whispered to himself, the recordings providing all the proof he needed. Ryan sat across from James Reynolds in the lawyer's office, his fingers drumming nervously on the armrest of his chair, the worn fabric rough beneath his calloused hands. The ceiling fan hummed steadily overhead as James inserted the USB drive into his computer, the small blue light blinking to life. Sunlight filtered through the Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across the polished desk between them, highlighting the scattered papers and family photos that decorated the experienced lawyer's workspace. "Let's hear what you've got," James said, his voice steady and professional, adjusting his tie with practiced ease. The first recording filled the room. Sarah's husband's cruel voice cut through the quiet office space, followed by his son's mocking laughter. The sound made Ryan's jaw clench tight enough to ache. He watched as James's expression grew more serious with each passing minute, the lawyer's pen moving swiftly across his legal pad as he made detailed notes, his handwriting becoming increasingly urgent. The recordings continued to play, revealing layer after layer of verbal abuse and threats. James's eyebrows furrowed deeper as he listened to discussions about beatings and locking Lily in the attic. The lawyer's knuckles whitened around his pen as particularly harsh threats echoed through the speakers. When the final clip ended, the silence felt heavy and meaningful, broken only by the soft whir of the computer's fan. James leaned back in his leather chair, removing his reading glasses and placing them carefully on the desk. "This is more than enough," he said firmly, his tone carrying years of legal experience. The admissions of physical abuse alone would be sufficient, but combined with the emotional abuse and neglect. He shook his head, his expression grim but determined, years of handling similar cases evident in his demeanor. Ryan released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his shoulders finally dropping from their tense position. "So we can protect her?" "Absolutely," James replied, pulling out several forms from his desk drawer with swift efficiency. "We'll file for an emergency hearing immediately. The recordings provide clear evidence of abuse and endangerment. We'll need affidavits from both you and Lily, documenting everything that's happened. Every detail matters." They spent the next hour going through paperwork, James explaining each document's purpose while Ryan signed where indicated, his signature becoming more confident with each page. The lawyer detailed their strategy for the emergency hearing, emphasizing how the recordings would support their case, mapping out each step with methodical precision. "I've already started the filing process," James said, organizing the signed documents into a crisp manila folder. "The hearing will be set for 2 days from now. Sarah's husband will be required to appear in court." He placed a reassuring hand on Ryan's shoulder, the gesture carrying the weight of his professional confidence. "We'll move quickly on this. Lily will be safe." Ryan stood up, his posture straight and determined, military training evident in his bearing. The fight for Lily's safety was now officially in motion, backed by the full force of the law, and he felt a surge of hope rise in his chest for the first time in weeks. The courthouse stood imposing against the morning sky, its stone facade a testament to justice and order. Ryan guided Lily up the wide steps, her small hand nestled in his larger one. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair neatly brushed, while Ryan's military bearings showed in his pressed suit and straight posture. Inside, their footsteps echoed off the polished floors as they made their way through security. Other people milled about, their hushed conversations creating a constant background murmur. James Reynolds met them in the hallway, his briefcase containing the evidence that would change their lives. "Remember what we talked about," Ryan whispered to Lily, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Just stay close to me. You're safe here." The courtroom doors opened, revealing rows of wooden benches and the judge's elevated desk. Ryan's jaw tightened as he spotted Sarah and her husband already seated on the opposite side. Sarah's husband sat rigid, his face a mask of contained anger while Sarah kept her eyes fixed on her lap. As they settled into their places, James organized his materials with practiced efficiency. The judge entered, her black robes rustling as she took her seat. Her stern expression surveyed the room before nodding to James to begin. "Your Honor," James began, his voice clear and steady, "I present evidence of systematic abuse and neglect." He proceeded to outline their case, each word measured and impactful. When the recording started playing, the courtroom grew absolutely still. The cruel voices filled the space, echoing off the high ceiling. Sarah's husband's threats and his son's mocking laughter caused several spectators to gasp. Ryan felt Lily tense beside him and wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders. The judge's expression remained carefully neutral as she listened, though her pen moved constantly across her notepad. Her eyes occasionally darted to Sarah's husband, who seemed to shrink slightly under her scrutiny. Sarah's face had gone pale, her hands trembling as she heard the recorded conversations. When the audio revealed discussions about beatings and locking Lily in the attic, she pressed her hands against her mouth, as if finally confronting the reality of what had happened under her roof. Lily sat remarkably still throughout the proceedings, her chin lifted slightly despite her obvious nervousness. Ryan noticed her unconsciously mirroring his own military posture, finding strength in the familiar stance. The final recording ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The judge adjusted her glasses, her expression grave as she surveyed the courtroom. "I will take a brief recess before delivering my decision," she announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Ryan met Lily's eyes and gave a small, reassuring nod, his hand steady on her shoulder as the judge rose from her seat. After a small break, the courtroom held its breath as the judge returned, her black robes sweeping behind her as she took her seat. The sharp crack of her gavel brought everyone to attention. Ryan's fingers tightened around Lily's small hand, his military training barely containing the rapid beating of his heart. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows across the wooden benches. The judge adjusted her glasses, her expression stern as she surveyed the room. The rustling of papers ceased, leaving only the soft hum of the air conditioning. Having reviewed the evidence presented, the judge began, her voice clear and authoritative. Including the audio recordings and witness statements, this court finds clear and sustained mistreatment of a minor. A collective intake of breath rippled through the spectators. Ryan felt Lily's hand trembling in his, but his grip remained steady, anchoring her. "I hereby grant full custody to Sergeant Ryan Matthews," the judge continued, her words ringing with finality. "Furthermore, I order the immediate arrest of the accused for child endangerment and abuse." Two court officers moved swiftly toward Sarah's husband. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the chamber as they secured his wrists. His face reddened with anger as he protested, but his words were lost in the growing murmurs of the crowd. Sarah sat frozen, her face draining of color as she watched her husband being led away. Her son, equally shocked, stared open-mouthed as the officers escorted his father toward the side door. Lily pressed her face into Ryan's arm, her shoulders shaking with silent tears. He wrapped his arm around her protectively, feeling the tension of months finally beginning to release. The relief in her expression spoke volumes as she looked up at him through wet eyelashes. Whispers and gasps continued to ripple through the courtroom as people processed the verdict. Some spectators nodded in approval, while others watched the proceedings with wide-eyed shock. Ryan leaned down close to Lily's ear, his voice soft but firm. "We did it. You're safe now." She managed a small, tearful smile, nodding against his arm as they stood together, ready to leave the courtroom and the darkness of the past behind them. The emptying courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations and shuffling feet. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor, as Ryan guided Lily toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the marble hallway, each step taking them closer to a new beginning. "Ryan, wait!" Sarah's voice cracked with desperation from behind them. Ryan's shoulders tensed, but he felt Lily's small hand squeeze his. Looking down, he met her eyes and saw her slight nod. The gesture, so small yet so brave, showed him she was ready to face this moment. Turning slowly, Ryan faced his ex-wife. Sarah stood alone, her makeup smeared by tears, her usual confident posture replaced by slumped shoulders. Her hollow eyes and trembling hands painted the picture of a woman coming undone. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible in the nearly empty courtroom. "I didn't know how bad it was." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with regret. Ryan's jaw tightened as he looked at her, memories of Lily's suffering fresh in his mind. The recordings they'd heard today played back in his thoughts, each cruel word and mocking laugh a reminder of what Sarah had allowed to happen. "You should have protected her," he replied, his voice low but firm. The words carried years of disappointment and pain. "She needed you, Sarah. She needed her mother." Sarah flinched at his words, more tears spilling down her cheeks. She opened her mouth to speak again, but no words came out. The truth of his statement seemed to hit her like a physical blow. Lily stood quietly beside her father, her presence a reminder of everything Sarah had failed to preserve. The young girl's eyes held no anger, just a sad acceptance that spoke volumes about her maturity beyond her years. Ryan turned away from Sarah, gently guiding Lily toward the courthouse doors. Their footsteps echoed through the marble hallway, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of her choices. The heavy doors swung open and fresh air rushed to meet them. The afternoon sun warmed their faces as they stepped outside, leaving behind the stale air of the courtroom and the remnants of painful memories. Ryan looked down at Lily, seeing the tension drain from her features. For the first time in what felt like forever, she looked truly at peace, her expression unburdened by fear or worry. The drive home wrapped them in comfortable silence, broken only by the soft hum of the engine. Ryan caught glimpses of Lily in the rearview mirror, noticing how her shoulders had finally relaxed, the weight of fear lifted from them. Sunlight danced across her face through the car windows, highlighting a peace he hadn't seen in months. As they entered the house, Ryan headed straight for the kitchen, pulling out pots and ingredients. "How about your favorite mac and cheese?" he asked, already knowing the answer from the way Lily's eyes lit up. She settled at the dining table, pulling out her sketchbook and colored pencils. The kitchen came alive with the sounds of cooking, the gentle bubble of boiling water, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables, and the occasional clink of utensils. Ryan moved with purpose, adding the special blend of cheeses that always made Lily smile. "Remember when you were 5, Ryan said, stirring the sauce, "and you decided to help me cook by adding glitter to the pasta?" He chuckled at the memory. Lily looked up from her drawing, a genuine laugh escaping her. "Dad, you promised never to bring that up again." Her eyes sparkled with mirth, a sound so pure it made Ryan's heart swell. "The pasta was very sparkly," he teased, watching her shake her head with a grin. Lily set aside her sketchbook and helped set the table, her movements more assured than they'd been in a long time. She placed the plates with care, arranging the silverware just so, a simple task that showed how much more at home she felt. "What should we do tomorrow?" Ryan asked, serving the steaming mac and cheese. "Maybe we could visit that art supply store you like." "Really?" Lily's face brightened. "I'd love that." She took a bite of her food, closing her eyes in appreciation. "This is perfect, Dad." Ryan watched his daughter eat, noting how her smile reached her eyes now, real and unguarded. The kitchen, once so quiet and empty, filled with the warm presence of their shared happiness. The morning light streamed through the kitchen windows as Ryan sipped his coffee, his phone buzzing repeatedly on the counter. News traveled fast in their small town, and messages of support flooded in from neighbors, old friends, and even casual acquaintances. Each notification brought words of encouragement and offers of help. "Everything okay, Dad?" Lily asked from the dining table where she was finishing her breakfast. "More than okay," Ryan smiled, showing her some of the messages. "Seems like we have quite a few people in our corner." The phone rang and Ryan answered to find it was the local social services office. They wanted to check in and arrange a visit to ensure Lily was settling in well. Ryan agreed, appreciating their thoroughness and concern. Later that morning, 2 social workers arrived carrying a wrapped package and wearing warm smiles. They introduced themselves as Claire and Maria, their gentle demeanor immediately putting Lily at ease. "We brought you something," Claire said, handing the package to Lily. Inside was a handmade blanket, soft and colorful. Lily's eyes lit up as she ran her fingers over the fabric. The social workers sat with Lily in the living room, their questions kind and unhurried. "How do you like school?" Maria asked, her voice gentle. "I like art class the best," Lily replied, her voice growing stronger with each response. A small giggle escaped her when Claire shared a funny story about her own daughter's art projects. Ryan stood in the doorway, watching the interaction with grateful eyes. The sound of Lily's laughter, once so rare, now filled the room more frequently. She spoke about her teachers, her favorite subjects, and even shared some of her recent drawings, something she hadn't done with strangers in months. Throughout the day, more messages arrived. Teachers, neighbors, and family friends reached out, each offering their support in different ways. Some promised to bring meals, others offered to help with school supplies or after-school activities. Lily seemed to bloom under the attention, her shoulders straightening a little more with each kind word and gesture. When she showed the social workers her sketchbook, her voice carried a confidence that made Ryan's heart swell with pride. The visit extended into the afternoon, with Claire and Maria ensuring both Ryan and Lily had all the resources and support they needed. They provided contact numbers for counseling services and support groups, all while maintaining a warmth that made the information feel less clinical and more caring. As Ryan walked them to the door, Claire touched his arm gently. "You've done the right thing," she said softly. And you're not alone in this. Ryan closed the door behind them, a smile playing on his lips. The community's outpouring of kindness had reinforced what he already knew. He had made the right choices for Lily's future. If you enjoyed the story of Ryan, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.